Hi! Would you like to learn some useful vocabulary connected to the American election? Welcome to Jen's Jyugyou. My name is Jen, and today you're going to learn 20 useful expressions connected to the United States election. To begin, I want to say that I am not American. I am Canadian, but the topic of the American election is dominating the news here in Canada and in many other countries around the world as well. So as a result, I thought it would be very helpful to review some of the vocabulary and expressions that have been coming up again and again in the news. In the United States of America, they have an election every 4 years. Their election is held on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. In Canada, we also have our elections every 4 years, but we usually have them on the third Monday in October. Election is a noun, and it means the event where the next president or the next candidate is chosen through the process of voting. When you are voting for someone, you could also use the verb to elect them. So in the election, you elect someone. This is done through the process of voting. To vote for someone means that you are officially expressing your opinion as to what person should be chosen. In the case of the election, Americans will be choosing who they want to represent them for their president. So they're going to pick which candidate they want to represent them. Candidate means the person who is trying to become elected. And we have the expression that this candidate is running in the election. In this case, running doesn't mean that they are physically sprinting. To run in an election means that you have put yourself forward as a candidate and you are trying to win the competition. You're trying to become elected. The way that Americans are voting in this election is by a ballot. A ballot is a slip of paper that is used for voting. It has each of the candidates' names written on it and a box next to each name. Voters will check off the box for which person they want to win. So the slip of paper is called a ballot, which is where we get the expression from to cast your ballot. Cast your ballot means to vote in an election. So on November 3rd, Americans will cast their ballot for the next president of the United States. Head to the polls. Head to the polls means that you are voting in the election. Usually people will physically head to the polls and cast their ballot in person. But 2020 has been a crazy, unpredictable year. And due to COVID-19, there are two ways of voting that have been discussed in the news quite frequently these days. One of them is absentee voting. Absentee voting is when an American citizen who is registered to vote wants to vote in the election, but they are unable to physically go in person because they are in a different country or sometimes even in a different state within the US from their home state. In that case, they are absent. They are away from the place where they need to go to vote. So they can request from the government to get a special ballot in advance, and then they will vote for the person they want and return the ballot. This is an absentee ballot that you have to request if you are absent from where you should be going to vote. The other type of ballot, which has been discussed frequently in the news these days, is mail-in voting. So mail-in voting is when a state has decided to mail out ballots to everybody. Once they get it in the mail, they can fill it out and return it by mail to help protect them from COVID. They don't have to go to the polling station. However, if they want to take their ballot to the polling station, in some states they are able to do that. For the election this year in 2020, there are 9 states that are primarily doing mail-in voting. They want to encourage voters to mail in their ballot and not go to the actual polls. Then there are 36 states where voters can request to be sent a ballot so that they don't have to physically go to the polls. The other remaining 5 states are a lot more strict and say that you can only get an absentee or mail-in ballot if you have a valid excuse. So that is the way things are looking this year for the 2020 election, which is different than normal. So what are Americans casting their ballots for? What are their choices in this election? As you know, they have 2 main choices because the United States is usually referred to as a 2-party system, meaning there are only 2 political parties that people have to choose from: the Republicans and the Democrats. The Republican Party tends to have more conservative, more traditional views. The Republican Party, as you know, is led by Donald Trump. And when you look at maps about the political race this year, the Republican Party is represented in red. Their mascot is an elephant. On the other hand, there is the Democratic Party. This party tends to have more liberal views. As you know, this year the party is being led by Joe Biden. Usually on political maps, the Democrats are represented by blue. Their mascot is a donkey. As I mentioned, the Democratic Party is usually represented by the color blue, and the Republican Party is usually represented by the color red. And this is where we get the expressions a blue state and a red state. If you have a blue state, it means that the majority of people in that state usually tend to vote Democratic. And if you have a red state, it means the majority of people in that state usually tend to vote Republican. However, more commonly in the news, you will hear the expressions a swing state or a battleground state. A swing state is a state where people don't always tend to vote one way. Maybe sometimes the majority of people will vote Republican, sometimes the majority of people will vote Democratic. It's difficult to tell what the outcome will be in advance. The vote could swing either way. That's why we have the expression swing state or battleground state, because these are the states, the types of states where the political candidates are going to do the most campaigning. A political campaign is a lot of different decisions and advertising type things which are done to try and influence voters' decisions. Connected to these swing states or battleground states, there is another useful expression that can be used for the states or also for individuals who haven't decided how to vote yet. You can say that someone is leaning towards the left or they are leaning towards the right. So they haven't decided yet, but they think, oh, maybe this is the best choice, but 100% I have not made up my mind. If you are leaning towards the left, it means that you are usually more liberal and you're possibly considering voting Democratic. If you are leaning towards the right, it means you're probably a little bit more conservative and usually might be considering voting Republican, but you haven't decided yet. That's why it's leaning towards the left or leaning towards the right. Who is ahead at the polls? Before, I taught you the expression head to the polls, meaning to vote. Who is ahead at the polls means who is winning or who appears to be winning, who seems like they are going to win. Now, in terms of winning this election, there are 2 interesting expressions I want to teach you. This is the electoral vote versus the popular vote. The popular vote means which candidate actually got the most votes. How many people directly voted for that candidate counts as the popular vote. But in the United States, the popular vote doesn't actually decide who will become the president. The electoral vote is what decides who will be the next president. When discussing the electoral vote, you might have heard the number 270. 270 is a very important number. This is because the electoral vote happens among 538 people. And in order for the president to win, he needs to get at least 270 of those votes. These special voters, those 538 people, are chosen as part of a special committee in the United States called the Electoral College. The Electoral College has different people representing every single state. The number of electors that are chosen to be in the Electoral College is worked out based on the population of the state. For example, if you look at the map of the United States, California has the highest population, the most amount of people live in California. So they have 55 electors that are part of the Electoral Committee. However, even though the state of Alaska is also fairly big, it only has 3 electors because not very many people live in Alaska. So, looking at the map of the US, each state has a different number of electors. Minnesota has 10 electors that will vote directly for who will be the president. Their vote, along with the votes of all electorates, are loosely based on the outcome of the popular vote. But in the United States, they also have a system called winner takes all. In a winner-takes-all system, it means that even if the results of the popular vote are very, very close to each other, the winner gets everything. So looking at the example of Minnesota, say 60% of people vote A and 40% vote B. You would think that because there are 10 representatives, 10 votes, 6 of them would go with A and the 40 would go with B in order to represent the actual popular vote. But because of the winner-takes-all system, all 10 of those electorates are going to vote A when it comes down to the actual presidential election. So in Canada, we have a system called first past the post when it comes to elections. And I thought this system was confusing. But in all honesty, when I look at the American way of voting with the popular vote versus the electoral vote versus who will actually finally be president, I find it even more confusing. Speaking about Canada and Canadian politics, if you would like to learn more political vocabulary and learn about politics in Canada, please check out a video I made about that over here. So today, you learned 20 useful expressions to help describe and understand what's happening with the 2020 US presidential election. And now it's time for Question of the Day. Today's question is, who do you think will win in the 2020 US election? Please be polite in your comments and let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching this lesson. If you found it useful, please subscribe to Jen's Jyugyou and give this video a thumbs up. Good luck with your English studies. See you in the next lesson.